Commander Rhiannon Hayes never expected her routine survey mission to end with her ship buried in the crystalline soil of an uncharted planet. The emergency landing had been rough, leaving her vessel's hull scratched and dented by the planet's peculiar atmospheric conditions. Through the cracked viewscreen, she could see nothing but darkness pierced by occasional flashes of bioluminescent life forms. The ship's systems had detected breathable atmosphere moments before impact, which seemed like the universe's idea of a cruel joke. Sure, she could breathe, but in this absolute darkness, she might as well have landed in a tomb. Her emergency beacon was broadcasting, but help would take days to arrive, if it came at all. Rhiannon activated her suit's external lights and began assessing the damage. The ship's primary power core was intact, but the backup systems were failing one by one. She had maybe 48 hours before life support would give out. The sound of something scraping against the hull made her freeze. In the beam of her helmet light, she saw movement, a ripple in the darkness that shouldn't have been there. Her hand instinctively moved to her sidearm, but she hesitated. First contact protocols were clear. No aggressive actions unless directly threatened. "Hello," she called out, feeling slightly foolish. The universal translator in her suit processed her words into a series of harmonic frequencies that most known sentient species could perceive. The response came not in sound but in light, a pattern of bioluminescent pulses that made her suit's sensors go wild. From the darkness emerged a figure that defied her expectations. It was tall, with a body that seemed to be composed of translucent tissue that conducted light like fiber optic cables. Where a face might be, there was a complex array of crystalline structures that pulsed with internal light. The alien raised what appeared to be an appendage, mimicking her non-threatening stance. Her suit's translator struggled to process the light patterns, but eventually produced a rough translation. "Safety. Follow. Danger comes." Rhiannon hesitated only a moment before making a decision that would change human history. "Lead the way," she said, grabbing her emergency pack from the ship. The alien's light patterns shifted to a steady rhythm that she interpreted as acknowledgement. As they moved through the darkness, Rhiannon began to understand why the alien was so concerned. The ground beneath their feet trembled with increasing frequency, and in the distance, she could hear something that sounded like the planet itself groaning. The alien, who eventually conveyed through light patterns that its name was Zivik, led her through a series of crystalline formations that seemed to respond to its presence, lighting up with gentle pulses as they passed. They were heading deeper underground, but rather than feeling claustrophobic, Rhiannon was amazed by the expanding network of bioluminescent structures that revealed themselves. After what seemed like hours of walking, they entered a vast chamber that took her breath away. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters above them, covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with light in complex patterns. Below she could see what appeared to be a settlement, structures that seemed to grow from the crystal itself, inhabited by dozens of beings similar to Zivik. "Welcome," Zivik's lights pulsed, the translator now better at interpreting the patterns, "to Haven below. You are the first surface dweller to see our home in 10,000 cycles." As Rhiannon took in the magnificent sight, she realized she wasn't just looking at a refuge. She was looking at the future. Here, in this hidden city, two species had a chance to bridge the gap between their worlds. But first, she needed to understand why these beings had retreated underground, and what danger had prompted Zivik to save her. The ground shook again, more violently this time, and the lights in the chamber flickered. Zivik's patterns became more urgent. "The awakening begins. We must prepare." "Prepare for what?" Rhiannon asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Whatever was causing these tremors was more than just geological activity. "For what sleeps above," Zivik responded, its lights dimming to a solemn glow. "The entity that drove us beneath the surface. It stirs once more, and this time, we cannot face it alone." As if in response to Zivik's words, a deep rumble echoed through the chamber, causing the crystals to vibrate in a haunting harmony. Rhiannon realized that her crash landing might have been more than an accident. It might have been destiny. The crystalline archives of Haven below hummed with ancient knowledge as Rhiannon followed Zivik through towering shelves of light-infused crystals. Each formation contained millennia of history, stored in patterns of light that the luminary, as Zivik's people called themselves, could read like books. 3 days had passed since her crash landing, and each moment revealed new wonders that challenged everything she thought she knew about alien civilizations. Your people store memories in light, Rhiannon marveled, watching as Zivik's crystalline features pulsed in harmony with a particularly large formation. But how do you prevent data degradation over time? Zivik's response came in patterns that her translator had grown increasingly adept at interpreting. The crystals are living things, Commander Hayes. They grow, adapt, and preserve. What you might call data, we call shared consciousness, eternal and evolving. The archive chamber shuddered as another tremor passed through the planet. These quakes had grown more frequent, and with each one, Rhiannon noticed the luminaries' light patterns becoming more erratic with worry. She had learned to read their basic emotional states through these fluctuations. Fear manifested as quick, sharp pulses, while calm appeared as slow, steady waves. "Show me what sleeps above," she requested, her voice firm despite her apprehension. "If I'm going to help, I need to understand what we're facing." Zivik hesitated, its light dimming momentarily before brightening with resolve. It led her to a central crystal formation that dwarfed the others. As its appendages made contact with the crystal surface, the entire chamber transformed. Light patterns coalesced into three-dimensional images that surrounded them, showing scenes from thousands of years ago. Rhiannon watched in awe as the history of Nixus played out before her. The luminary had once lived on the surface, their cities rising like forests of light into the sky. But then something emerged from the planet's core, a vast entity that fed on energy itself. The images showed creatures that defied description, beings of void and hunger that consumed light and life with equal veracity. "The Void Dancers," Zivik explained, the translator struggling to convey the concept. "They sleep in cycles, awakening only to feed. Our ancestors retreated underground, learning to shield our energy signatures. But each awakening cycle, they grow stronger, consuming more. This cycle, we fear they will delve deep enough to find us." The images shifted to show the luminaries' defensive measures. Vast networks of crystal formations that channeled and redirected energy, making their civilization virtually invisible to the energy-sensing void dancers. But Rhiannon noticed something else in the patterns, something that made her scientific mind race with possibilities. "These crystal formations," she said, pointing to specific structures in the historical record, "they're not just defensive, are they? They're parts of a larger system, a weapon." Zivik's light patterns flickered with surprise. "You see much, Commander." "Yes, our ancestors attempted to create a resonance weapon that would disrupt the Void Dancer's energy absorption. But they could never generate enough power to affect entities of such size. The attempt nearly destroyed what remained of our civilization." Rhiannon's mind was already working through calculations. Her crashed ship's power core was based on antimatter containment, a technology that could generate enormous amounts of energy in controlled bursts. If that could be combined with the luminary's crystal technology. "What if," she began slowly, "we could combine our technologies? My ship's power core uses controlled matter-antimatter annihilation. If we could channel that energy through your crystal networks." The suggestion caused a ripple of light patterns through the archive chamber as other luminary, who had been quietly observing, reacted to her words. Zivik's own patterns became complex with excitement and concern. Such an attempt would be dangerous, it cautioned. The energy release could destabilize the entire crystal network. If it failed, we would lose our only protection against the Void Dancers. Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger than any before. In the distance, they could hear the sound of crystal formations cracking under stress. Time was running out. "If we do nothing, they'll find you anyway," Rhiannon argued. My people have a saying. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all. Zivik considered her words, its light patterns shifting through various frequencies as it processed the possibility. Finally, it reached out and touched her arm, the first direct physical contact it had initiated. The sensation was like touching living fiber optics, warm and thrumming with energy. Then we must act quickly, Zivik decided. The alignment of the crystal networks will take time, and I sense the void dancers are already beginning to stir. They spent the next several hours in intense preparation. Rhiannon worked with luminary engineers to carefully remove her ship's power core, while Zivik coordinated the repositioning of key crystal formations throughout Haven below. The work was delicate and dangerous. One wrong move could either trigger an antimatter containment failure or shatter the ancient crystal networks. As they worked, Rhiannon learned more about the luminaries' unique relationship with their crystal technology. Each formation was literally alive, responding to their touch and thoughts like an extension of their own consciousness. The crystals sang with harmonic frequencies that her human ears could barely perceive, but which seemed to carry deep meaning for the luminary. Your presence has changed things, Zivik observed as they made final adjustments to the power core's mounting. For millennia, we accepted our fate as watchers and hiders. You brought with you something we had lost: hope. Rhiannon smiled, though her expression was hidden behind her suit's visor. That's another thing about humans, Zivik. We're really bad at accepting fate. We prefer to make our own. The chamber rumbled again, and this time the sound that followed was different, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The void dancers were awakening, and their hunger would soon drive them to search deeper than ever before. As Rhiannon looked at the massive crystal array they had modified, now humming with the combined potential of human and luminary technology, she knew they were about to either save two civilizations or witness the end of both. The real question was, would the power of light be enough to drive back the encroaching darkness? The deep resonance of awakening void dancers echoed through Haven below's crystal corridors as Rhiannon and Zivik raced against time. They had successfully integrated her ship's antimatter core with the ancient crystal network, but the real challenge lay ahead. The massive chamber housing their hybrid weapon thrummed with potential energy, crystal formations pulsing with an intensity that made Rhiannon's teeth vibrate. The containment field is fluctuating, she called out, watching the readings on her suit's display. We need to stabilize the resonance frequency before attempting full power activation. Zivik's light patterns flickered rapidly as it communicated with other luminary technicians. Their bodies glowed with increasing brightness as they channeled their own energy into the crystal network, attempting to regulate the wild oscillations caused by the merger of technologies. The crystals resist the foreign energy, Zivik explained, its usual steady patterns becoming erratic with strain. They were grown to channel light, not this chaos you call antimatter. Another tremor rocked the chamber, stronger than any before. Crystalline dust rained from the ceiling, and in the distance they heard the distinctive sound of major support structures cracking. The void dancers were getting closer. Through her suit's sensors, Rhiannon detected massive energy disturbances above them. They're directly overhead now, she reported, her voice tense. How much time do we need? Time is not the issue, Zivik responded, its patterns showing frustration. The crystal network requires harmony to function. Your antimatter energy creates discord. We cannot force them to work together. Rhiannon watched the energy readings spike and fall erratically. The luminary were right. They were trying to force two fundamentally different systems to cooperate, but maybe that was the wrong approach entirely. What if we stop trying to make them work together? She suggested, an idea forming. What if instead we use their discord? Create a deliberate dissonance. Zivik's patterns showed confusion. Dissonance would shatter the crystals. Exactly, Rhiannon said, growing excited. The void dancers feed on energy, but what happens when that energy is completely chaotic, unpredictable, no pattern to consume? Understanding dawned in Zivik's light patterns. Like trying to drink from a shattered cup, it mused. But the crystal network would be destroyed. Generations of growth and knowledge lost. Not if we do it right, Rhiannon argued. We can create a controlled destruction, use the crystal network like a series of tuning forks. Each shattered piece will release energy in a different frequency, creating a cascade of chaotic resonance. Zivik finished, its patterns brightening with comprehension. The Void Dancers would not be able to process such discord. They worked frantically to reconfigure their weapon. Instead of trying to channel the antimatter energy smoothly through the crystals, they set up deliberate points of resistance. Each crystal formation was calculated to shatter in a specific sequence, releasing its stored energy in waves of pure chaos. As they worked, Rhiannon learned more about the true nature of the luminaries' connection to their crystal technology. Each broken formation would mean more than just lost data. It would be like losing a piece of their collective consciousness. The sacrifice they were preparing to make humbled her. "Your people are giving up so much," she said softly to Zivik as they made final adjustments. "There has to be a way to preserve some of the network." Zivik's patterns showed a complex emotion her translator couldn't quite capture. "Some things must be broken to be rebuilt stronger," it said. "Your presence has taught us that change, even painful change, can lead to evolution." A massive tremor shook the chamber, and this time the sound that followed was unmistakable. The screech of something vast and hungry tearing through the planet's crust. Through the crystal ceiling, they could see dark shapes moving, void-black tentacles of anti-light that probed ever deeper. "They're here," Rhiannon breathed, watching as the sensors on her suit went haywire from the energy distortions. The Void Dancers were unlike anything humanity had encountered, beings that seemed to exist in the space between spaces, consuming light and energy like black holes given consciousness. All luminary, Zivik broadcast, its patterns reaching every corner of Haven below. Prepare for resonance cascade. Disconnect from all non-essential crystal formations. What we preserve in our own light must carry us forward. Rhiannon took her position at the antimatter controls while Zivik joined a circle of luminary elders. Their bodies glowed with increasing intensity as they prepared to channel and direct the coming chaos. "Ready?" she asked, her hand hovering over the initiation sequence. "Ready," Zivik confirmed, its pattern steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "Rhiannon, thank you for showing us that sometimes the greatest light comes from facing the darkness." She smiled behind her visor. "Thank you for showing me that sometimes the most beautiful things can grow in the dark." With a deep breath, Rhiannon activated the sequence. The antimatter core pulsed once, twice, and then released its energy in a carefully controlled burst. The crystal formations began to shatter one by one, each release of energy precisely timed and tuned. The sound was unlike anything Rhiannon had ever experienced, a symphony of destruction that built upon itself, growing more complex and chaotic with each shattered crystal. Through her suit's filters, she watched as waves of discordant energy rippled upward, meeting the probing tendrils of the Void Dancers. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The void-black tentacles recoiled as if burned, their smooth energy-absorbing surfaces unable to process the chaotic wavelengths. The beings emitted a sound that made Rhiannon's bones vibrate, a screech of confusion and pain that echoed through the planet's crust. But they weren't finished yet. This was just the beginning of their desperate gambit, and the hardest part was still to come. As the crystal network continued its calculated collapse, Rhiannon and the Luminary prepared for the next phase of their plan, one that would either drive the Void Dancers back into their deep sleep or unleash something even more dangerous than the ancient entities they faced. The chaotic resonance filled Haven below with a thunderous symphony of shattering crystal and discordant energy. Rhiannon watched through her suit's enhanced display as the Void Dancers recoiled from each wave of unpredictable energy, their vast forms writhing against the assault. But it wasn't enough. They were adapting, learning to process the chaos. They're stabilizing their energy absorption patterns. She called out to Zivik, who stood within the circle of luminary elders. Their combined glow had reached an intensity that threatened to overwhelm her suit's light filters. We need to increase the chaos factor. Impossible. Zivek's patterns flickered urgently. Any more destruction to the network will compromise the structural integrity of Haven below. We'll collapse the entire cavity. Another tremor shook the chamber as one of the void dancers slammed against the crystal ceiling, its void-black mass seeking any weakness in their defenses. Cracks spread across the ancient crystal formations like spider webs, each one releasing stored energy in random bursts. That's when Rhiannon noticed something unexpected in her readings. Zivek. The shattered crystals. They're not just releasing stored energy. They're creating new frequency patterns as they break. The fragments are resonating with each other. Zivek's pattern showed sudden understanding. Yes, yes. The living crystal adapts, even in destruction. Each fragment becomes a new voice in the chaos. They had discovered something unprecedented. The broken crystal network wasn't just releasing its stored energy, it was actively generating new patterns. The void dancers, evolved to consume predictable energy signatures, were facing an ever-evolving challenge. We need to amplify this effect, Rhiannon said, her mind racing. Can your people channel energy through the crystal fragments themselves? It has never been attempted, Zivek replied, but its pattern showed excitement rather than doubt. The fragments are unstable, unpredictable. Exactly what we need. The remaining luminary arranged themselves in a complex geometric pattern, their bodies glowing with increasing intensity. As they began to channel their energy, the scattered crystal fragments lifted into the air, creating a swirling vortex of light and resonance. Rhiannon adjusted the antimatter core's output, synchronizing it with the luminary's energy pulses. The effect was immediate and stunning. Each crystal fragment became a point of chaos, refracting and redirecting energy in patterns that even her advanced sensors couldn't predict. The void dancer's assault faltered. Their probe-like tentacles withdrew from the crystal ceiling, unable to process the overwhelming complexity of energy signatures. But victory remained uncertain. The entities were massive, ancient, and possessed of an intelligence that humanity had never encountered before. Through her suit's sensors, Rhiannon detected a change in the void dancer's behavior. They were pulling back, but not retreating. Instead, they seemed to be gathering themselves for something bigger. They're combining their energy signatures, she warned. I think they're going to try to overwhelm us with sheer power. Zivek's patterns showed grim determination. Then we must do the same. All luminary, channel your remaining energy through the fragment field. Hold nothing back. The chamber erupted with light as every luminary pushed their energy output to maximum. The crystal fragments spun faster, creating a tornado of chaotic resonance that made Rhiannon's teeth rattle even through her suit's protection. The antimatter core whined as she pushed it to its limits, its containment field straining against the forces being generated. Above them, the void dancers struck as one, their combined mass pressing down on Haven below with the force of a collapsing star. The crystal ceiling began to crack, huge fragments falling into the chaos vortex below. But instead of destroying their defense, each new fragment added to its complexity, creating even more unpredictable patterns. Rhiannon's suit sensors were overwhelmed, but she could feel something building, a resonance point where chaos itself became a kind of order. The void dancers sensed it too, their assault becoming desperate as they tried to break through before the wave could crest. Zivek, she shouted over the deepening crescendo of energies. We need to release everything at once. A single pulse of pure chaos. It will destroy what remains of Haven below. Zivek's patterns were barely visible in the overwhelming light. We will lose everything. But your people will survive. Sometimes you have to break everything to build something new. Through their weeks of working together, Zivek had learned to trust Rhiannon's instincts. Its pattern showed momentary hesitation before broadcasting to all luminary. Release all energy on my signal. Let the light of our civilization become the weapon that saves it. The chamber filled with a sound beyond sound, a light beyond light. Every remaining crystal in Haven below shattered simultaneously, their fragments joining the vortex of chaos. The antimatter core reached critical resonance, its energy merging with the luminary's combined output in a single, perfect moment of pure disorder. The wave that erupted from Haven below was visible from orbit, a blast of chaotic energy that rippled through the planet's crust like a newborn sun. The Void Dancers, caught in the wave's epicenter, found themselves facing something they couldn't adapt to, an energy pattern that was simultaneously everything and nothing, order and chaos combined. When the light faded and the dust settled, Haven below was transformed. The grand crystal chambers and ancient archives were gone, replaced by a vast cavern filled with glittering crystal fragments that continued to pulse with weak but persistent light. And above, where the Void Dancers had been, there was only empty space. Rhiannon checked her suit's readings with shaking hands. The energy signatures, they're gone. The Void Dancers have retreated to the planet's core. But these readings suggest they're dormant. No, more than that. They're changing. Zivik, its own light, dimmed from the enormous energy expenditure, studied the readings. The chaos wave didn't just drive them back. It forced them to evolve. They must adapt or remain forever dormant. As the surviving luminary emerged from their protective positions, their light patterns showed not despair at their lost civilization, but wonder at what they had achieved. Among the ruins of Haven below, something new was already beginning to grow. Crystal formations that pulsed with both order and chaos, stronger and more resilient than before. "Look," Zivik said softly, pointing to where new crystal formations were already sprouting from the scattered fragments. "Life finds new ways. Perhaps we needed this destruction to grow beyond our old limitations." Rhiannon watched in amazement as the crystals grew, their patterns more complex and beautiful than anything she had seen in the old formations. "What happens now?" she asked. Zivik's patterns showed determination and hope. "Now, we rebuild. But not just Haven below. We build something new, something that combines the best of both our people's knowledge and capabilities." The light of the growing crystals reflected off Rhiannon's suit, creating patterns that seemed to dance between order and chaos, much like the future that lay ahead of them. 6 months after the battle that transformed Haven below, Rhiannon stood in the newly constructed observation chamber, watching the crystalline city grow. The integration of human technology with luminary crystal engineering had created something unprecedented, a living metropolis that adapted and evolved to meet its inhabitants' needs. Her communication with Earth had led to the establishment of the first human luminary joint settlement. Scientists and diplomats from both species worked together, studying the remarkable properties of the new hybrid crystals that had emerged from the chaos of that fateful day. "The latest growth patterns are fascinating," Zivik said, approaching her. Its light patterns had grown more complex over the months, reflecting the evolution of their shared society. The crystals are incorporating elements of human neural architecture into their structure. Rhiannon smiled, watching a new formation take shape. Unlike the rigid, orderly crystals of old Haven below, these new growths combine geometric precision with organic fluidity. "They're learning from us, just as we're learning from them." The chamber they stood in was a testament to this fusion of technologies. Human holographic displays merged seamlessly with luminary light-based communications, creating an information network that both species could access naturally. Below them, teams of human engineers worked alongside luminary crystal shapers, their combined expertise giving birth to innovations neither species could have achieved alone. "The Void Dancers have begun their transformation," Zivik reported, its patterns showing a mix of wonder and cautious optimism. "Our deep sensors show them developing new energy processing patterns. The chaos wave didn't just force them to retreat, it sparked an evolution." This was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of their desperate gambit. The Void Dancers, rather than being destroyed or permanently dormant, were changing. The chaos they had been exposed to had triggered a metamorphosis, their energy-consuming nature shifting towards something more symbiotic. The planet's core readings are stabilizing, Rhiannon noted, checking the latest data. It's as if they're learning to process energy in a way that benefits the entire ecosystem rather than just consuming it. A group of human children ran past them, their laughter echoing through the crystal corridors. Following them were young luminary, their light patterns flickering with joy as they played some game that combined elements of both cultures. This, more than anything, showed how far they had come. The Council wants to establish more joint settlements, Zivik said, its patterns brightening. They believe what we've created here could be replicated on other worlds. A new kind of civilization, built on the principles of adaptation and harmony. Rhiannon thought about how far they had come from that first frightening encounter in the darkness. When I crashed here, I thought I was facing death in the dark. Instead, I found a new beginning for both our peoples. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden pulse of energy from deep below. Unlike the threatening tremors of the past, this was more like a gentle heartbeat. The new crystal formations responded with synchronized pulses of light, creating a mesmerizing display. They're communicating, Zivik explained, its patterns showing excitement. The void dancers, or what they're becoming, are establishing a rhythm with the crystal network, a balance between chaos and order. Through the observation window, they could see the latest architectural marvel taking shape, a towering spire of living crystal that would serve as a beacon for incoming ships. Its design incorporated spiral patterns the human mathematicians had identified in everything from galaxies to seashells, merged with the complex light-conducting properties of luminary crystal technology. We've received word from the Human Scientific Council, Rhiannon said, checking her communications display. They want to establish a permanent research institute here. They're calling it the Convergence Academy. Zivik's patterns showed amusement. Your people have a gift for naming things. Though perhaps convergence doesn't fully capture what we've achieved here. This is more than just two species coming together. It's the birth of something entirely new. As if to emphasize this point, a new crystal formation began to grow nearby, its structure unlike anything they had seen before. It pulsed with internal light that seemed to dance between patterns, neither purely luminary nor conforming to human mathematical models, but something uniquely its own. Look at this, Rhiannon said, scanning the formation. The energy signature. It's maintaining chaos and order simultaneously. It shouldn't be possible, but here it is, Zivik finished. Like us, the impossible made possible through adaptation and understanding. A small group of human and luminary scientists gathered around the new formation, their excited discussions filling the chamber with a mix of spoken words and light patterns. The translator systems they had developed allowed for seamless communication, but more and more, members of both species were learning to understand each other's natural modes of expression. Rhiannon thought about the report she would soon send back to Earth. How could she possibly convey the magnitude of what they had discovered? This wasn't just about new technology or diplomatic relations. It was about fundamental transformation, about finding strength in difference and growth through challenge. You're thinking deep thoughts, Zivik observed, its patterns showing the familiar warmth that had developed between them. I'm thinking about light and darkness, she replied. About how sometimes we have to face the void to find new stars. Outside the observation chamber, the crystalline city continued to grow, each new formation a testament to the power of adaptation and cooperation. The darkness above was no longer something to fear, but a frontier to explore together. And deep below, where the void dancers underwent their own transformation, a new kind of harmony was emerging, one that promised to change not just this world, but all those that would follow in their footsteps. As Rhiannon and Zivik stood watching their shared creation flourish, they knew that this was just the beginning. The universe was vast, full of darkness and light, chaos and order. But together, they had proven that the most beautiful things could emerge from the spaces in between, in the perfect balance of difference and unity, of breaking and rebuilding, of ending and beginning anew. The crystal formations pulsed with light, singing their endless song of transformation, as humanity and the luminary stepped forward into their shared future, ready to face whatever new wonders or challenges awaited them among the stars.